Hey folks, welcome to City of Tea. We are here with the hottest tea, and I'm Shannon.
I'm Gabe.
And I'm PJ.
And you have Skylar.
And Flo!
Throwback.
We're back.
We're back.
We're back.
The
It's a
band is
throwback.
back together.
The band is back together. This is a City of Tea episode, which includes only people who have spent time on Voices River City.
Right.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's also intentionally that way to you all, the listeners of this show. We're just gonna jump right in. We're not gonna do the thing where we talk about how Lisa Kaplan was probably drunk on Tuesday when she was giving her
Or on ketamine.
comment. Or what?
To be fair to Lisa Kaplan,
Or on ketamine.
Oh, right, on ketamine. That's right.
There's a decent chance that I was drunk and on drugs on Tuesday too. So
I also could have been drunk on Tuesday. That's just,
Right.
I was
That's
for
true.
sure sober on Tuesday.
Listen, Lisa, you and me, we have something in common. We were drinking on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And that's cool vibes.
Of all the things to be mad about at Lisa Kaplan about, I feel like being drunk at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday is kind of the most innocuous one to be. I mean, if I'm just trying to not be a hypocrite as I sit on this microphone and do the show, you know what I mean?
That's it.
Right. Yeah. You know what I really love about what's happening right now is the accountability.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The accountability is really important. And it's one of the things that I love about all of you. Speaking of accountability,
What
I knew you were doing it. I knew
Where
you were
are we
doing it.
going?
Oh, snap.
Take us there, Shannon.
Yeah, for real.
We've spent a long time, I think, as a group of people who don't generally spend a significant amount of time keeping ourselves quiet, we have actually spent a lot of time being quiet on what we are about to jump into. And some of you may have already guessed, this is a conversation about Voices River City, how it ended, and about harm and accountability and
the co-host who's not on this podcast right now.
And the co-host that is not on this podcast right now.
Conspicuously missing.
When Gabe, PJ, and I sat down we never actually sat down. I think we had the conversation over text message. But when we started talking about
No, we went to dinner.
Oh, that's right. We went to Coconut.
I
so
wasn't
tea,
invited.
coconut.
I was not invited.
That's right.
What?
Yeah.
Coconut.
Yeah.
I remember
Were you
now.
invited?
I was not invited.
I was not invited.
You weren't
Okay,
invited.
that's cool.
Flo, you were running for mayor.
I don't
and
care. I
I was a
needed
little
to eat.
busy.
We're not
I needed
invited.
to eat, and I wasn't invited for food.
Flo
so-
needed nutrition more than ever.
Right.
I know. We're rude and disrespectful.
Okay. All right. Just so we're
Much
clear.
like
This is the shit that I came here to stir.
the shit hath been stirred.
He's like, no, Shannon treated us all to generous drinks and a lovely dessert afterwards. You weren't invited? My bad.
I will tell you that I did not pay for that dinner, for everyone's dinner. I paid for my own. One of the things that we talked about when we were sort of imagining what City of Tea would look like, one, we wouldn't have had to imagine it necessarily had Voices not ended. And then when we did begin to talk about what City of Tea would look like, it was that we wanted it to be a show that was different from Voices. We wanted it to be a show that wasn't only talking about the local politics and leadership or lack thereof. We wanted it to be a show where we could highlight how rad Sacramento is, and that the City of Tea really is, the tea is, this city is dope. And I think that we've done that, for sure. But one of the things that we have never talked about is how City of Tea was born, and that's because of the crumble of Voices River City, which is a show for those. I feel like anyone who's listening to our show
Probably
Probably
is
listen.
familiar.
Make no assumptions.
Yeah, but
True.
Because this can also reach a new listenership. So, like,
Yeah.
is listenership a word? Whatever.
Yes.
It can reach some new
Sure.
listeners. So,
yeah, so Voices River City was a podcast. It had took on many different iterations, founded by Dave Kempa, but it for the longest it was a podcast, and that podcast was us speaking truth to power. That podcast included Dave Kempa, Skylar, myself, and then Flo joined the crew, and we talked a lot of shit. We spoke a lot of truth to power. We recorded 2 episodes a week for a really long time, like
most of the pandemic.
most of the
Mhm.
pandemic. We were doing some very, very cool things. And then Flo ran for mayor. And as that happened, it made the most sense for her to depart the show. And that was a really big and sort of like a bittersweet thing for us. There is an episode that is very emotionally intense and heartfelt.
And dear to my heart, on April 19th, 2023, when we all said goodbye to the 4 of us being the hosts of that podcast.
Yeah, that was a thing. Fast forward, and Skylar and Kempa left the show. Kempa being more involved in the campaign. Skylar also doing his own thing with his hands in multiple different campaigns, and it just felt like neither of them could really be on the show and say the things that needed to be said and also be paid by the people that we were talking shit about, maybe.
I mean, more to the point, it was just kind of like I'm like, man, I can't. If I go on this show right now and start making jokes about like nutting in a cop's eye or something, like Kevin McCarty's people are gonna be all over this within seconds, and it's just gonna like completely
blow up.
fuck the momentum that we're all trying to build here. So
Howard
I
Chan is
thought-
going to be apoplectic.
Right.
Yeah.
It was because in the primary, Skylar was working on my campaign through Amplify, and so was Dave. He was working on it for comms. And so I thought that was why. I did not know that there were other reasons that you wanted to sound off that you didn't feel like you could. So
well,
yeah,
I mean,
for
it
sure.
I also, for the last year or so of Voices as it stood before, was working for Councilmember Katie Valenzuela, and that also kind of made it so that any dumb shit that I said on the show was going to have consequences that were beyond, just Howard Chan being mad at me.
Right.
So,
Sure.
and I'm not going to come on the show and not say a bunch of dumb shit. So,
and I also just feel like, one of the things that is unfair, and I just want to name it because I have the opportunity now, is the way in which, like, there were so many times when we were on Voices, and then throughout the campaign, people would come back and be like, well, this person said, and this person said, and I'm like, yeah, the name of the show is Voices. It's like The View. Like, we all have different perspectives. And as adults, we are all responsible for our own, like, comments. But then for Katie Valenzuela and for me as a candidate, it was like I somehow suddenly become responsible for what other people around me have said, even if I didn't say it. And I'm like, that's a little weird. And I wonder if you would do the same thing if it was the reverse, right? Especially it's not lost on me,
Yep.
like the racial and gender dynamic. And there's this way that we sort of, especially mammy Black women, but also just like make women of color responsible for the things that other people say. And so it's not lost on me, just what that dynamic looks like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I appreciated both, at least at the time, both of them having the wherewithal to be like, yeah, we probably should like fall back on account of we understand these dynamics, even if they're not fair.
Yeah, and that sort of it left us in a space of then sort of like having conversations around what's next with Voices. And as the last person, the last woman standing with no reason to shut the fuck up, that I could carry the show
I love
forward.
that. I love that that's your claim to fame. No reason to shut the fuck up.
Right? Can't shut
I
the
have
fuck up
actually
on a business
never in
card.
I have never once in my life had a reason to shut the fuck up, and it's one of my greatest privileges. So yeah, so then it was like we started to brainstorm who else, you know, could be on the show, and Gabe's name came up and PJ's name came up, and then,
Yep.
you know, and then City
Both had been co-hosts on
right, both had
Voices
been
at
on
times,
Voices.
right?
And
Yeah.
so the plan was to move that forward, to move Voices forward in that way. And there was a plan to turn things over, to turn over the accounts, to turn over the money, to, you know, turn everything over. And that was all going to be turned over to me. And that decision was, I think, kind of made like maybe that was in October-ish of 23. And there were a number of things that were left undone. They were supposed to be done by Kempa, and they continued to be left undone. And we, as a group, continued to say like, "Hey, what about, you know, this or that?" And we're essentially ghosted on all of those things.
But I think we have to go back before that, Shannon,
Oh,
because
tell
we
me,
had
tell
had
the
some,
story, because
we had some, you know, I mean, so I want to, you know, leave space for the fact that like in a normal working relationship, there can be turbulence, right? And so there were several times throughout the recording of Voices where we had some turbulence that we kind of had to like deal with on our own, right?
Yeah.
One of them was, you know, a sort of internal conversation when we kind of offered an open invitation to Katie Valenzuela to come back when she wanted to.
Right.
And then she reached out and was like, hey, can I come on to talk about this thing? And we were like, yeah. And then there was a little bit of like friction with Dave at the time because he was like, I don't want some council member dictating to us what our show is, right? And it was more in principle than it was, I think, in like we all agreed and we ended up having the show anyway. But it was my at least first taste of like, wait, what's going on? And I didn't understand why he was so upset about it at the time, but I was just kind of like, maybe I don't know something, or maybe this is a journalist thing because I'm not a journalist. So I was like, okay. And then we had some situations where the same thing had happened before, where like he was supposed to handle some things and then they didn't happen. And then we kind of had to have like a restorative conversation to be able to bring everybody back together and say, like, what are we going to do moving forward? There had been conversations that you all had because, I mean, just to give kind of listeners the deep cut, I was working for Public Health Advocates the entire time we were working on the show. And so I was not part of the like financial part of Voices River City. I know Dave because we were both part of the Nehemiah Emerging Leaders Program and we were in class 7. And so I've known him for 10 years. And so I remember when this was an idea that he wanted to create an independent journalism platform when we were in NELP. And it's really cool to me because there are 2 people in my class who really have made the dreams from our class come true. There are lots of other people who've done great things, but like him and Raymond James Irwin, who opened up Fizz in Sacramento, which is in DOCO, like that was their dream when we were in the class. And it's really cool to be able to stand in someone's dream. So when, you know, when Dave reached out to me and said, hey, the pandemic is happening, can you come on as an epidemiologist and do this show? I was like, absolutely. Like, I've been listening to Voices when Skylar and Dave were doing it by themselves. And I was like, this is great. I'll come on as a guest host and talk a little bit about what we know about the pandemic at the time. And then it became this thing. And I felt like I was helping a friend build a dream while also making new friends and having this opportunity to be able to get through the pandemic. And so I guess for me, it was like, we're all in this together. And yes, there's going to be, we've all been in organizations and workplaces and whatever else, and there are some hiccups, but we work through them and we figure it out. And so there were a few times where some of these like frictions came up and we had to figure out how to work through them. And it was often, unfortunately, like sort of Dave versus everybody else. And that was like a dynamic that was set up. So that sets the stage for what happened in December of 2023.
I think the other thing maybe that is worth bringing up is that there was a time when we had Kempa, Skylar, and I had a conversation about formalizing Voices in such a way that included like getting a CPA and potentially like widening the
growing,
umbrella.
yeah, expanding the thing.
Right.
Also, like really quick, I just want to say for the get that we didn't really name exactly what we're doing here. We just kind of launched into
That's
it.
true.
So I
Yeah, we
think
didn't.
like before we get too much further into it, I want to let people who are listening to this know that like what we're basically this is an episode. We sat on a lot of shit that maybe we shouldn't have sat on because
Correct.
there was somebody who that we were involved with who was doing a bunch of problematic shit, and we sat on it for a number of reasons, not the least of which was because somebody who was connected to the show was running a contentious mayoral race, and we didn't want to do anything that was going to give any ammunition to people who would be able to use it against Flo. So
But
what we're doing today, because kind of new shit has come to light, is sort of letting that out into the air and into the community. Because honestly, y'all deserve. I feel like as someone who was involved in this, that y'all deserve to have like a real honest accounting of what happened with voices, and more importantly, how it has shaped Dave Kempa's role in our community. So that is sort of the point of the conversation. So that's why this sounds like a confession.
yeah,
Because we're going back through like years of history, honestly, to kind of just to give you, I mean, this is the tea, honestly, to give you like the real piping hot tea on what happened with voices and kind of from that journey to where we are today. So that's the focus of the episode.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to just be able to say that, like, you know, for me, again, I have known Dave since we were in NELP together, but also like a really good friend of mine. Like
he was at your wedding.
Yes, I was like in 2018, I had an ectopic pregnancy, which I talked about, you know, on social media at the time, and it was Dave who drove me with you know, someone else to my surgery. Like that was not an inconsequential thing for someone who had never even had a cavity and was going up to have a second surgery in 2 weeks and was terrified, right? And needed support. And so like this is not someone who I don't have a lot of love for still to this day. And also, we need to talk about what has happened and the harm that has been caused, because it's not just us. And the more that we're silent, the more that we give a pass for the harm to continue.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about this, just to get this part out of the way, is that I think that for a really long time our silence was rooted um in really caring for Kempa and really in that love and wanting to hold space for struggle, and it's not as if the four of us together came together on the show, but we had individual relationships with him prior to, and those relationships were maintained because of a commitment to friendship and caring for and loving another person that you're in community with. And that is the same reason why we're having this conversation, because we need to care for community, and sometimes that means having really difficult conversations that feel scary, as Zoom gives us a thumbs up.
For those watching on YouTube,
I need to turn that fucking shit off. Zoom is like animating this thing in ways that are extremely inappropriate, right?
Very inappropriate, rude and disrespectful. One might say rude and disrespectful.
So I want to move Gabe and PJ in, because you all are a part of this story as well, and it's been a lot of me, Skylar, and Shannon kind of telling the original story. But you have a space as we get back into December of 2023 and what has transpired since then around what went down. So I want to also make sure your voices are heard.
I just want to give credence to the fact that Flo very casually dropped that she's never had a cavity. Like, what the fuck? Come on.
I know.
Right?
That's also that is
Humble
also
brag.
rude and disrespectful.
It's extremely disrespectful.
So
For those of you that are watching on YouTube, I'm just showing off my smile.
shine bright like a diamond, those teeth.
Shout out to my best friend's dad, Dr. Edmund Efford, who is still practicing dentistry in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
All right, for all of our
Well, he fucking should have been practicing dentistry here because I have like 38 cavities.
you ain't never lied, man. I have like hails of root canals.
And
I
also
got
my
like hails
pediatric
of
dentist, Dr. Jack, whose last name I forget because he always went by Dr. Jack, but Dr. Jack, you're a real one too.
okay, enough. Flo
And also my friend Brandon, who was my
Commercial
dentist
break.
for a little bit in Michigan. Shout out to Brandon. Like,
here go
shout
the
out to more
ad
highs.
buys.
Wait, who is Brandon?
Brandon was my dentist. So
no.
we went to college together.
No, we're not going to shout out all of our dentists.
Yeah, we went to college
We're
together.
also
and
not
he's my
going to shout out
dentist.
all of our friends. This
And
is
then now
this is
also, I got to shout out my Sacramento dentist, which is Dr. Ronald Blanchett. Blanchett, who takes care of my teeth now. Like, shout out to all four of my
We'll put this in the show notes.
Yeah.
You know what the
Right.
problem is
Skip this
about
section.
here's the issue. The problem about being on a podcast with Flo when she's unemployed is that she's not multitasking, so she's held a present right now and therefore has so much to say.
I do.
Because she was always Flo and I were always working while recording
Always.
back in the Voices days.
Always.
Speaking of back in the Voices days.
Unemployed Flo! I'm outside now.
Right. Before Skylar very appropriately brought us to the point of the show.
Yes. Thank you, Skylar,
we were
for-
talking about how we had this conversation. There was a time in the Voices history where we were really pushing to grow it, to formalize some things, to have sort of a co-op model of ownership between the three of us who were financially invested in the show. And we had this was sort of one of the first of what will become multiple issues with Kempa. We had this hang, the three of us, Kempa, Sky, myself, sat down to talk about sort of next steps, making a plan with the CPA, doing this, doing that. Sort of, we're dreaming, right? Dreaming, imagining, making plans. Skylar and I live like fucking 3 blocks from each other, and we have for years at this point. And so we rode to this meeting together and we had a great conversation. We all left feeling good. We had a productive conversation. We were excited about the future. Skylar was in a position to be able to join in like meeting with the CPA, and yeah, we were going to push forward. And at the end of that, we all give each other a hug, say, all right, later dudes, let's go home.
Well, and if I may, like, we leave this meeting all, I think, feeling like, at least I know Shannon and I felt like, and it felt like Dave felt like it too, like better about this project than any of us had.
Oh yeah, we were stoked.
In like months. We were like,
Yeah.
oh shit, like we thought this might fall apart. This feels really good right now. Like, not only is this not going to fall apart,
but it's going to be amazing.
we're going to expand this thing into like the next level. You know,
this is sick. We've got like
we're all on the same
items.
page.
We're on the same page. We want to like, you know, we're going to be able to sort of like tap into our like individual passions outside of the ones that we share around talking shit about local politics. Yeah, it really did. Like, I remember getting in the car after this and the two of us being like, this is dope. Like, we've got some cool shit ahead. And while we were driving home, and this
is like a 5-minute drive, by the way.
Right.
Yes, it is not a far drive by any means. It's like a fucking 2.5 mile drive. Skylar was talking shit, as he does, about my music, which was country.
Oh yeah, I definitely was. Then.
We could have a whole conversation about music.
Yeah.
We could have a
because
whole conversation about music,
But
and
we're
that's
not going
we're
to.
not.
We're not,
We're not
going,
going to.
We're going to
We're
leave
not
that alone.
going
Other than the
to.
fact that Shannon has shitty taste in music, but Shannon, continue.
And that Skylar
What
has
I
deep
would like
cuts
you to do
into
is shut
white
the
music
fuck up,
listening.
because I do not.
No
What I
one.
have, Mr. Henry,
Uh,
is a diverse taste in music, and also I
also-
love
that only
country.
He
happens
also
to fucking correspond to country.
He also listens to deep.
It doesn't
deep
happen to
cuts.
correspond. Listen, I'm not doing this with you today,
All
Skylar.
I'm saying is he listens to deep niche cuts, and even other white people
Damn
are
it.
like, we don't know what this white music is because it feels like AP white music, and there's also white music listening for beginners. And
What
so,
she's talking about is like bands like Ministry.
Also completely unrelated.
This is
What
not
I
like
need-
super
what I
deep
need you to
cut
do,
shit.
what I
This
need
is
both
bands
of
that a
you to
lot of
do,
people have heard of.
respectfully shut the fuck up.
all I'm saying is,
Respectfully.
as
I
the
love
person with
you
a very
both.
blackety black playlist, I was told that I was being gaslit by Skylar because of what he described as his white music listening, and I was given a white music for beginners, white music as a second language.
This,
and
you know
I
what?
knew
You know what we
language-
don't need to do right now is litigate
this.
this whole fucking conversation.
No.
All right,
We're
thank
done.
you.
We're
All
done
right, let's
talking
get back
about
to
music.
We have a thing we need to talk about.
Except to say that Skylar and I were driving home,
Yes.
talking
fucking
trash
5 minutes
about
away,
each other's, yes.
and
Thank
we're
you.
talking, like, Skylar's talking shit about my country music, and we're going back and forth as we do. Anyone who has ever spent any time with me and Skylar knows that there is a back and forth, that
Yes.
there's a bit of a sibling rivalry, a bit of a go fuck yourself from both of us, but rooted in
That's not how I feel about
deep
you,
love,
but
deep
okay.
love. But my phone is going off. My phone is lighting up. It is lighting up, and I'm not really paying attention to it because I'm having to defend myself to Skylar. And so I drop Skylar off. I get home. I look at my phone and I'm like, the fuck. So Kempa has sent multiple messages. He is very upset because we had a pre-meeting and a post-meeting, and
which is just the ride to and from the
ride to and
Right,
from.
exactly. It's
We're
because
like-
we came in the same car.
Right.
I was probably talking about how I had a lot of farts and
Right.
like
To reset, like we get out of this meeting that everybody feels great about, or so we thought. We go get in the car, and like literally 4 minutes later, we get a text. It's like, I'm gonna go see the CPA alone because I
Bye,
don't
y'all.
trust you guys because you're conspiring against me in your meetings before and after, our hang or whatever.
and we're
And
like,
I am completely
huh?
unaware this is happening because I was not there.
Well, also
right, you weren't in the chat.
Right. You're doing
that-
a whole other thing that we are trying to.
No, but this is before.
No,
I
this was
ran for
before.
mayor.
This was before.
This
So
was summer of 2022.
yeah, this was
Ah,
before.
Why
So
weren't you involved?
I wasn't involved
Well,
because
because of the money.
I donated
Yeah.
to Voices, but
Yeah.
I was never
Oh, because it
receiving
had to
money.
do with money.
Because
That's
of the
right.
money.
Okay,
So
yes, all right, fair.
this whole thing happens, and Kempa's like, I'm doing this by myself, whatever. And like Skylar and I both reply, and we're just like, what? Like, what happened? Like, whatever. Let's talk about this later. Fast forward, and we have this like try to fix whatever the fuck happened in Flo's backyard.
Yes, the beer
which-
summit at the
the beer-
Floasis.
At the Floasis, the beer summit at the Floasis, which also turns into Flo. Like, we were all like kind of pushing it off, and then it happened. Flo was like, no, we need to do this. We need to do this on this day. And it's because she was also going to tell us at that same gathering that she had decided to run for mayor. And that I think that like that is sort of the gathering, the thing that sets the trajectory for more fucked up shit.
Was it the same?
It
Okay.
was the same. Yeah,
Okay,
it was
alright.
the same. And so then we end up, during that time, it's awkward, but we're excited for Flo, and we're like, yeah, that shit was fucked up, like, push forward. And I don't want to discount that Kempa did provide an apology.
Well, this factors in, right? Because like
Yeah.
he came through, and it really felt like at the time, like he understood, he was taking accountability, he was like doing a whole thing, and like I'm not, Shannon holds grudges way better than I do. I'm terrible at holding grudges. You can
Listen, I'm not sure
hang
that
on.
that's. I'm not sure those are
Well,
okay.
well,
Okay. All right.
what?
Um,
So like you can like light my house on fire, and as long as you come to me afterwards and you're like, hey, I thought about that again, and I was out of line there, and I really shouldn't have done
Yeah.
that. I'm sorry I did, and I'm gonna work on doing better. I will like forgive you. Like
Nope.
that, like I like that is maybe that can maybe be a sign of weakness or strength or whatever, but like so I was so mad at him at this time because he had just been fucking up so bad, but then he like just took accountability for all of it and like was like, here's my plan to do better. And I was like, dude, great. Then we're right back to where we were.
I'm pretty sure
Things
these
are
are two
great.
different conversations because this one happened in the summer of 2022, and I did not decide to run for mayor until after Kula's husband Bobby approached me at her birthday party in March of 2023. I think these are two separate.
They are not. They are not.
Sure they are. Okay.
No, they are
I'm being
100% not.
overruled, but I'm pretty sure these were different.
Because there was a whole thing where it was like an awkward. Kempa was at your house beforehand. You and he were in the house, and then Sky and I came together to your house because, again, see comment about where we live.
Yes. Yes.
So we showed up, and it was very awkward when we first walked into the house. Like you and
I remember that, but I think these are two separate gatherings.
I am
Flo,
going to
you're-
tell you
Okay,
that you're
fine,
wrong.
fine,
You are
fine.
becoming hysterical.
Anyway.
Right. It's two separate things. But
No,
the other two people who were on this call remember them as the same. So carry on. Proceed.
so this whole thing happens. We yes, 100% Skylar is somebody who forgives much easier. I am a salty fucking cynical ass bitch, and that doesn't
I forgive
mean
even easier than both of them.
yes,
Yes.
for sure. For
Like on
me,
the scale of forgiveness to not, it's like me, then Skylar, then Shannon.
Mm.
Yeah.
no, it's like you, Skylar, Satan, Shannon,
And then anonymous. Who does
Yeah.
not forgive.
and then anonymous. Yeah.
Right.
I am definitely somebody who, without real accountability, I have a very hard time. I have a very hard time with the forgiveness. Like I stay working off of like vibes, and if I'm feeling like it's like manipulative, like my trauma baby life is like a lot. I stay seeing the flags, and that has served me, but it has also hurt me in my life. So anyway, we have this thing in the backyard, and the way that we leave it is excited because Flo's running for mayor and we're fucking stoked on it. And
Because bullying works. Just
because
okay.
Flo stays bullying.
No, because I was bullied into running for mayor, and I stand by that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make me go get the mug.
Again, bullying at its
Anyway.
finest. No one talks to you when you're a kid about the positive side of peer pressure. They only tell you, like, if your friends jump off a bridge, would you do it too? But when your friends are like, will you run for mayor? And then you finally succumb to the pressure, like, that's the other side.
Oh, if all your friends were running for mayor,
Actually-
for mayor too.
Actually think that the DARE program is all about the positives of peer pressure. They're like, oh, your friends are going to try to get you to do drugs. And you're like, drugs are great. Like, this is fantastic.
Drugs are fucking sick, my dude. Of course I want to do drugs with my friends.
Just ask Lisa Kaplan at 4:30 on a Tuesday afternoon.
As someone
Holler.
I feel like I have to bring the voice of levity here as someone who's both a public health professional who wants to acknowledge that, like,
Oh my God.
substance misuse is a real challenge.
Voices
And also
2.0.
that we should, decriminalize substance use as like
It's a challenge to get it exactly right because it's so like you're really walking a line when you're abusing a substance to where like it's really good for like a minute, but you're walking the razor's edge because if you abuse it too much, then you're over on the other side and then it's not fun anymore. So like
which we have found one of the most, for this group of people, harmful substances has been white male entitlement.
come on, talk about it.
So we have this issue, these issues that continue to come up with Kempa, and he gets very up, he's that thing happens after the hang, talking about formalizing things, and then it's like break time. We have our break. And when it's about time to start to relaunch the show Voices, this is remind me, because I don't remember at this time. Gabe, was it just supposed to be you and me?
Yeah, so like towards after Kempa and Skylar left and I came on as like a full-time host, there was a period of time where it was you, me, and Dave.
Yep.
I'm sorry. So it was after Flo left
Right.
and Skylar left, then it was you, me, and Dave. And then Dave made the decision
Right.
to walk away from it. And I think that you and I did maybe like 3 episodes on our own.
Okay, yeah.
Before it completely crumbled.
Right. So then like we had that sort of holiday break, and then the plan, Gabe and Kempa left, and then Gabe and I had made plans. Okay, we're going to move forward with the show. But at this point, we're still waiting. We're still waiting for Kempa to turn over like the financial stuff. We're waiting for financial stuff. I think maybe that is like the big thing. But also,
well,
like,
there was also we had recorded an episode right at like towards the end of 2023 with a guest who came on to talk about the ongoing genocide in Palestine, and
which at the time was not ongoing. At the time, it was like 3 days after. It was like October 10th or something.
Right.
Very, very, very fresh.
Yeah.
Well, I say ongoing because
now it is ongoing.
Basically 1948, but yeah, and so there was some like disagreements about how we were going to put out the episode, and like I think that was like really what heightened the conflict about like Dave's role on the show because of his working with the campaign. And Shannon, myself, Dave, and Skylar all got drinks and kind of like discussed what we were going to do with the episode, and we all came to the agreement that we were going to publish it. But there had to be like very specific edits. There were a couple of other hands that were in the pot when it came to edits, but we all agreed that it was going to be published. And then after like a month, it still hadn't been published. And like we kind of kept asking questions about like, accounts that were supposed to be handed over to Shannon, as well as the publication of that episode in like a group text message. And then eventually we all got essentially yelled at for like asking for the things that Dave said that he was going to do to be done. And he blocked all of us.
Right. So that was
just really quick to back up, like just so everybody understands, this was also a big reason why Dave and me stepped back from the podcast completely. Because we did have this thing where we had this great interview with somebody, a Palestinian man, around what had happened. And we were so afraid for Flo's campaign and for Katie Valenzuela's work that we felt like we couldn't just release it. Katie's campaign, that we felt like we couldn't release it as is because it was too easy. It would be too easy for the Sacramento shitasses to weaponize it against these women of color who were running these successful campaigns due to my involvement and Kempa's involvement in these things. And so that was the crux of why Kempa and I backed out, because the whole point was like, hey, this is Voices River City. It's unfiltered, uncensored. takes on the news, and clearly we can't do that anymore because of kind of other pools that we've stepped into. And so we made the decision at that point, both of us, to just back out, because that I would honestly, like, that was a great interview. Like I felt super bad about not being able to use it, but at the same time there was just too much at stake with progressive candidates in this town to just say fuck it and release it, you know.
Say that I disagreed with that. And so, like, at the time, my childhood friend Annie, who went to preschool with me, was consulting on my campaign. And we consulted with Annie because she had like worked on Summer Lee's congressional campaign. This is what she does for a living, and she's known me for forever. And I know she had some takes on it, but my view on it, just for the sake of transparency, was like, publish it. Like, I stand in the space of like, there are things that I'm willing to lose over. And I wrote out my values before I started that campaign. And I was really clear that, like, there are certain things that just matter to me, and that winning is not worth it at all costs. And I feel really good about the campaign that we ran, because I painted a vision for Sacramento, and we talked about it being a us thing, not a me thing. And that was really important to me. And I also feel like if you can't figure out where to stand in the case of genocide, you probably have bigger issues than the need to run for public office. That just should not be a thing that you should have to hesitate on. And I've always asked myself the question of who would I be in history when things come up. And for me, it's like, I got to stand by my values, and that's important to me. And I understand being strategic and all those other things, but that was important. But I really deeply respect and appreciate that so many people were trying to protect us, because you do understand the stakes and you were invested in us and you know where our hearts lie. But I was kind of like, publish it. Like, and that may have been a huge mistake, and maybe we wouldn't have, like, but that's where I was at the time.
But that was the thing, that there was like it was like a real source of tension, that it was like, how do we move forward? Like, you know, what
and I appreciate the protection, right? Black women and women of color.
Well, and I mean, like, to be like totally frank, it's not, that decision for me wasn't all about protecting you and Katie. It was about protecting Sacramento, because you guys represented this real chance to, like, make real shit happen in here. And so, and there's like no world in which I feel like I get to make a decision that jeopardizes that because I want my podcast to come out uncensored, you know? So, like, I mean, obviously there was a piece of it that was to protect you and Katie, but like, it was more about, like, just like, there's so much on the fuck, there's so much at stake for Sacramento. And I'm not comfortable making the call to be like, this is worth potentially jeopardizing that.
I think that, like, there were.
And I feel like Dave felt the same way. He's not here to say it, but I would guess that is exactly how Dave felt.
Yeah, and I think that, like, those conversations were had. Like, this is a thing that we have to take a lot of care with, I think.
And to give, you know, like the previous conversation that Ben and Skylar and Dave had prior to my involvement with the show, like, you guys walked away from that conversation feeling a very certain way, and then immediately kind of had it flipped. And I heard about that conversation secondhand, but in, like, being involved in this conversation around this episode and handing over the reign of the show to us, and then seeing how that conversation ended with all of us feeling like we had a plan, that we knew what we were doing going forward, and then having it completely flip again was kind of my first taste of understanding, like, oh, okay, this is like repeated behavior. And the way that he's engaging with the folks that he's telling things to is not in good faith, like out of love, out of friendship, out of an understanding that we're here, we're playing for the same team. It was like we were the problem because we were asking for the things that we had all committed to. And
in that, like, when we were asking for the things, the response was like, I'm going through something, that's why I haven't done it. I'm obviously going through something, that's why I haven't done it. I'm blocking you all. Like, that was the way this situation was handled. That was
which also none of us, we had multiple conversations because this is a guy like he has had mental health challenges, and a lot of people, including myself, and I think probably everybody sitting on this podcast have at one point or another experienced mental health challenges. And that is like, that's super real.
I am incredibly medicated.
Totally. I'm not stigmatizing it at all. But we had so many conversations up to this point that we're like, it's 100% cool if you're having a hard time right now. Like you just need, like, you have a group of people who all love you, who are all sympathetic, who are all here to like help carry the load if it's too heavy at times. And like we told him that directly so many times, and it's just like, dude, we're not mad because you aren't doing the thing. We're mad because you disappear from communication. And like none of us can do, and like we don't have the admin access that you do to any of this stuff. It's not because like, if you're having a hard time and you need to bow out for a week, great. Tag one of us in so that we can step up and make sure that we can keep the thing running, and like blah 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 blah. And I mean, part of why I'm so frustrated with him is because I've had this conversation with him so many times.
Yep.
And I'm like, it's not that a person is struggling with mental health. It's that like you can't just disappear and then come back 2 months later and be like, fuck you for being mad at me because I'm struggling with mental health. When when people have been reaching out to you over and over and over and over again to be like, we want to support you, just let us support you.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that like, as part of this conversation, it's super important to understand that like the perspective that we're trying to convey is, although it might not be clear at times, is that like, as a community and as like people who represent different aspects of our community in Sacramento, I would venture to say that we all consider ourselves to be like incredibly empathetic people. And if people slip up, like Shannon said, like if you show me the accountability, like if you show me that you can change, then like I'm gonna believe that, right? But like you have to show me, like the biggest apology is changed behavior. And I kind of got like the tail end of all this situation, but I think that like, what happened next after he unblocked us was that Shannon had reached out in a text message just saying like, I'm done with you. Like if you want to like hand over the rest, like the reins of the show to us, like and you're out of it, like as you said, like we can talk about having it continue on. And he like blew up in this very awkward text message with myself, Shannon, and Dave, where I was kind of like the child in the room watching my parents fight.
It was so bad.
It was just this really, and it was like a really degrading, toxic conversation of Dave essentially just yelling and disparaging Shannon and her role in the show over the number of years that she's been there. And I just saw this like happening, and it was like, dude, like this is my friend. Like this is someone who I care about. Like you don't have the right to talk to someone like that because you're like, we're adults. We know how to communicate effectively even when we're mad. And there was no effective communication. And it was really eye-opening to see, because I've, like Skylar said at the beginning of this episode, we've been sitting on a lot of this stuff for a really long time for various reasons. But I think that one of the hardest things on my part to have wrapped my head around is that for those people who do know Dave, like he's an incredibly charming person.
Yeah.
And like he's very easy to like. And like I met him maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and like it took me a long time hearing a lot of really bad things to finally get to the point of just being like, you know what? Like I don't think that this person deserves access to my time or energy or like mental space, because like they're not doing, like, for all the things that we purport to believe in, right? That like if your personal behavior can't align with those things, then like there cannot be this continued access to us and community, because you don't, like, if you, and I know it's hard to kind of like siphon through everything that we're saying and being like, okay, what's like the primary issue is like, it's not just like him being rude, or it's not just him being poor at communication. It's a continued lack of respect and abuse of people that are close to him in his life. And that is to me, more than anything, is sad. Like it's a really sad feeling to like have to do this episode and feel like,
Yes.
okay, you know what? Actually, people do need to know this, because like we don't live in an environment where we're eager to put people in a corner or isolate them or make them feel like an outcast. That's not my intention. I know that's not anyone his intention, but like we also have to be firm in understanding that like our ethics and our morals as people, they have to hold up. And when they get broken, or those lines get drawn and they get crossed, like there has to be consequences. And I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I think this would be a really good time to let people know what happened most recently, and I think what like drove a lot of us to this conclusion.
I think before we do that, if I can just say one thing, which is that in a similar way to Gabe, I also had experiences around hearing things and like, and then deciding still, and then having like personal experiences. I had one personal experience with Kempa where he was really upset with me before I was on Voices, and it didn't end super well. But still being like, I care about this guy, and I want to be like in community with him, and then to like see what ended up to experience what actually ended up happening in the end, and then also what, I don't know, Flo, if you just want to share what recently happened. It just like eventually you come to a point where it's like the comfort of our silence is, you just don't get to have it anymore.
You don't get it anymore, man. You don't get it anymore.
It's just not okay. And well, I guess I'll save this. Like, Flo, if and this really, what Flo is about to share, just like as a trigger warning, there's harsh language, and it's a white man who has said things to a Black woman, a well-respected community leader, someone who was less than 2,000 votes from being our mayor, someone who was a friend for 10 years.
Someone who is a source of inspiration for a lot of fucking people.
For a lot of people,
in
not
this
just
city,
in Sacramento,
including myself, and I'm assuming everybody on this call, but like, yeah.
Flo is like,
yeah. Sorry.
When it comes to Flo, she like, and I don't think we have to necessarily say how much we love her, especially after her run for mayor, but like, I'm a ride or die. And like, when I think about the way that Sacramento could be different, and that like more is possible, I think about that not just because it was her tagline, but because Flo creates spaces where it's very easy to imagine a space where everyone thrives. And I think like I've made this joke before about Flo, and people are like, "Oh my God, she's so nice." And I'm like, listen, everybody on the planet is Flo's best friend. Like, that is just how she works. And like, that is a joke, but it also speaks to the character that is Flo. Like, she will give you her time and her energy and her social capital and probably the code to get into her house. And like, and these like, and to think that an entitled white man did what he did and said what he said to her is 100% was the last fucking straw. I think, for all of us. And I'm sorry that it came to that, because maybe we should have said something sooner, but
I
it
actually do
happened.
want to name that real quick. I want to kind of back that up because I know there are people in this town who have experienced things with him that were like wildly inappropriate
Yeah.
and super shitty. And I think that those things were allowed to happen because he is more or less a well-respected member of the community. And like all of us, I mean, like dude, there's been years of my life I've counted him as one of my closest friends and a business partner in a
Fucking
business that
family,
I was
dude.
like really fucking proud of and like
Yes.
stood beside him with no problems. And because of that, I think that I heard about things every now and then that I'm ashamed to say it, but as long as we're doing this and as long as we're doing an accountability process, I'll name it that I fucking should have stood up for and I didn't because Dave was family. And there is sort of a thing where it's like, oh well, if he's not burning people's houses down, then I don't know if I need to come out and do public shit. But like
even arson today.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I think like doing the
not
whole
just
public
today.
doing the whole like public shit, I think is one thing. It's like, it's not, I mean, for me, I was done with him long before you were, Skylar, and that, that is what it is. And I did take accountability for anyone who was there on election night at Jets when I went completely feral on him. Like, I did reach out to him and apologize for that, because I do not want to be in community in the way that I was that night. Like, that is, I do not want to be that person. There is a version of me that is that person that I thought that I had left behind a long time ago. And I don't want to be the person who is like standing at the door of a bar saying, "Get the fuck up, you fucking piece of shit asshole, come outside." Like, and I, but that said, like, I was done with him, I think, before others of us were done with him. And there were various things that got me to that point. Um, but what Flo is about to share is the thing that got me to the point where where he does not get the comfort of silence anymore, of our silence anymore.
100%. And all I was trying to say earlier was just like, we're doing an accountability conversation. I'm not going to come in here and try and hold someone
Sure.
accountable while not doing it for myself. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like, I know there's people who are listening to this who probably are sitting here being like, what the fuck, dude? Like, you knew that like X, Y, and Z, and you just sat there. And like, I just want to say, like, you're 100% right. And that was
Yeah.
super shitty. And I've been like thinking about that a fucking lot. And if that is something, if my silence and any of that like impacted you in any way, like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I just want you to know if you're listening to this and that's how you feel about it, I'm fucking super sorry. And I don't have like a defense. It's just,
I mean, yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
And sorry, just before Flow starts, I also want to piggyback off of that and say that like although we're sharing our experiences, these are not the only experiences, but none of us are going to talk for other people who've had
Right.
experiences with him. But I think that it's important to know that there is, when we're talking about things that we've heard over the years, like there were numerous, right?
Yes.
And like very serious shit, right? That we're not going to take on because they're not our experiences. And I think that that's just an important thing to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody for saying that. And I'm not as aware of all of the things, but I certainly have heard the rumors, especially more recently. And I just want to name that, like, yeah, it's important for us to be able to hold people in our community accountable and to be able to, give light and give voice to people who often are victimized and then re-victimized by the lack of empathy that is shared. So what happened was exactly a week ago. I was hanging out at my house, just kind of like, watching stuff. It was late at night. I'm unemployed. I was like, what are we gonna do, right? And I got in my head because I had hung out with Dave and Skylar, and then independently, Shannon and Skylar on Saturday night. And so I was thinking a lot about voices. And I started going back through because I didn't really rewatch a lot of episodes simply because, I was working and we were recording 2 episodes a week. And so I started just going through episodes and just like listening to the intros and like laughing and kind of experiencing some nostalgia. And then I happened to pop up on what was one of our most popular episodes in recent time, which was our last episode is the 4 of us, the day I announced that I was running for mayor. And I got about like 15 minutes in and I started like crying because it was just so like special a moment. And we were crying on the show. I'm crying rewatching it. It was a thing, right? And so at 1:05 a.m. on Thursday, March 6th, I sent the YouTube link to Dave Kempa. And then I sent the following message. I said, I hope you're asleep and see this in the morning. And I said, I love you, Dave, forever, always. And I was like, and I'm really angry at you. I couldn't figure out why until Tuesday night because you blew up Voices, a desperately needed platform at the moment we needed it. And when it was on the precipice of being something you dreamed of and we dreamed of with you, you intentionally fumbled on the 1 yard line. And I had to sit and watch you do it during one of the hardest fights of my life. And again, just for context, especially, I said earlier today that like he has been my friend of 10 years. He drove me to a surgery that I was terrified of. Like we spent holidays together. This is somebody who you could not have told me more than a week ago was not my friend. And he initially responded and said he was glad that I shared, and but he was really frustrated because he felt like I was kind of diminishing his mental health crisis. And then I was like, look, I believe you were having a mental health crisis, but I also think you have the wherewithal not to lash out at the people around you and to be able to handle things differently. And then, we kind of went back and forth via text, and then he called me. And I said, when you go off on people in this way, right, it creates a situation where, people are not necessarily really inclined to want to come back into community with you because it's hurtful and you don't always fully apologize and share things. And I was like, and you've blown up a lot of relationships. And this is where the conversation started to go off the rails because he started saying, like who, like who, like who, like who, and just over and over again. So I couldn't get a word in edgewise. And so I didn't actually get a chance to name anyone. And I was just like, it's frustrating because in all the years that we've been friends, I have largely dealt with you with kid gloves because I know that you can be sensitive and I know that there's like a temper there. And I was like, the very first time that I share my real feelings with you, I was like, unlike the other co-hosts on Voices, I wasn't paid. And so as a public health professional during a pandemic, I recorded twice a week. I invested in this community because I believed in you and I believed in what this platform could be. And right at the moment where we were, 8 weeks away from winning the primary, from having people really tuning into Voices and it becoming all that it could have been, there could have been multiple podcasts with Voices. Like this could have been an independent journalism platform, right? And instead, very quietly, everyone just sort of let it die. A quick Twitter post that was just like, "Hey, Voices isn't coming back. City of T launches," and that's it. And I'm like, we built a following. We built things together, and a lot of time and sweat equity and love was poured into that. And I should be able to say that to you as my friend of a decade and at least have you hear it. You don't have to agree with me. I don't require your agreement for us to be in relationship. But what followed was just so out of line because then he proceeded to call me, and this is a trigger warning for listeners, a dumb fucking cunt. And then when I said to him, "What did you just say to me?" He then proceeded to sing it to me, dumb fucking cunt, dumb fucking cunt, dumb fucking cunt, over and over again. And I said, this is not how people who love each other talk to each other. And I was like, I'm incredibly angry with you right now about the way that you chose to treat a platform that I invested in and I'm angry with you, but I'm still talking to you with love, and you're talking to me this way. And he said back, you're just mad because you lost the general election without me. Which was, so, you know, Kempa was what led comms in the primary with me. And then there were some challenges, especially with him and some of the other members of my team. And so he made the decision not to continue on, which was great because it was going to be a hard conversation about what we do moving into the general after we won. And so it was really hurtful because, of course, losing the election was not, you know, on my bucket list of like things I wanted to have happen, right? I have also made peace with that every opportunity has a cost and every loss has an opportunity. I'm really excited about some of the things we're planning for and gearing up for right now. But it also took a toll. I gave 20 months of my life to this goal. And to have someone who, again, is my friend of 10 years, just sort of say these mean things to me really cut me deeply for two reasons. Number one, I think when you're angry and when you're intoxicated, you are more of yourself. And so I think that that came from a place that was very real. And I think that there was some white male entitlement in there of like, it, I mean, I'm just going to say the thing, right? It was one step below calling me the N-word, right? It was like he knew well enough, but I'm a woman. And to call a woman a cunt and stupid because she doesn't agree with you, and then to sort of like throw in my face what you know is going to be a very sensitive topic for me. It was like you were intentionally trying to hurt me. Like there's no other reason for you to say that because I'm angry with you, but I'm not intentionally trying to hurt you. Like you may feel a way about me saying that you intentionally fumbled on the 1 yard line, but I didn't say that to hurt you. I said that because that's my view of things. And because as somebody who I thought you trusted and loved and cared about, that you'd at least be able to hear it and see my perspective and feel like it's valid for me to say, look, I've invested in this thing and I'm really upset about how it turned out. And he could have said, hey, man, like, I'm really upset about that. And I don't agree with you and whatever else. But to resort to name calling in such a very specific way and then to try to cut me. And so I said to him, I was like, you're really upset with Shannon for saying that, you know, you threw a tantrum instead of talking to us. And you talk about that as minimizing your mental health crisis. But you just spent time on this call telling me that it's been months, you know, or over a year since you've had any fallouts with anyone and you're in a good place. But I'm just telling you how I feel, and you resort to name calling and hurting me. That feels like a tantrum. It does. It feels like you were just trying to hurt me because I said something you didn't agree with. And that's not the same as having a full-on mental health crisis. Like you have some control over that, and for whatever reason you chose not to, and you chose to try to hurt someone who really cares deeply about you. And he couldn't get past that. And so finally I was just, you know, he was just like, you don't get to tell me how I feel and what my intentions are. And he was like, has anybody ever told you what your intentions are? And I was like, yeah, they're called friends, they're called family. Like when I've done things in my life, my friends have been like, I think you're doing this because, and he's absolutely right. You don't have to agree. Sometimes my family has been like, I think you're doing this because, and I'm like, I'm thinking about it out of respect and love for the relationship. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not why I did that, but I see why you believe that. And I appreciate you for sharing that perspective because I could have, you know, a potential like spot that I couldn't see. And sometimes they tell me things and I'm like, dang, yeah, you're right. I didn't see it, but you're absolutely right. But bottom line is that there's still love there. And because there's somebody I trust, I'm at least going to hear that person out. And that's what I was hoping for from this conversation. And instead it turned into this. And I was deeply hurt, like in a way that I kind of wasn't expecting. And I will own that maybe 1:05 in the morning is not the best time to bring up a conversation, but I'm up late. I said in the very beginning of that text that, like, I hope you see this in the morning. You don't have to respond. That's the beautiful thing about text. You called me to have this conversation, right? And then proceeded to let it go off the rails. You could have let it go, right? You could have not. Like, there were lots of choices you also had in this. So I'll own my part in that. I could have sent this at 6 p.m. and I didn't. I sent it in real time because that's when I was experiencing it. But also I walked away from it feeling like I just lost a friend and that there's not really a path back for me because it's now emotionally unsafe for me to have a conversation with you because you intentionally pulled out a weapon and tried to cut me with it. Like it wasn't like we were kind of doing a back and forth and he said something and I was like, damn, my feelings are kind of hurt by that. It was like you went for the jugular.
Yeah.
because I said something you didn't like. And that's not safe. And it made me reflect back on our relationship and the number of times that like I was wearing kid gloves. And I said this to him on the call. I was like wearing kid gloves with you because I know that you're sensitive, but it also means that I don't get to be fully myself and feel free in that space. And that's not fair to me as your friend. And so when he kept going on and on about how you don't get to tell me my intentions, I was just like, wow, Dave. And I finally just hung up the phone. And then, there have been several messages he sent, and I haven't responded since because I mean that Thursday, like a week ago, was really hard for me. Like I cried about it multiple times. Like this is somebody who I love, I still have love for, and who went out of their way to hurt me in a way that I wasn't expecting. And it kind of shakes you to your core because it makes you, for better or for worse, question all of your friendships and all of the people around you. And it also brought up, the things that really cut deeply, which is like, at my heart of it, like I am a Black woman, and to have somebody, weaponize my gender against me and, and call me unintelligent because I disagreed with them is hurtful. It really, like I'm sort of trying to hold it together right now, but it sucks. And
Yes.
and it taints all of these memories that I had that were really beautiful of us together, of Christmases and Thanksgivings and, hard times and good times. And now it makes all of that just like I shared that with somebody who would go out of their way to intentionally hurt me.
I mean, I think, Flo, that is a story. First of all, wait, before I even say this, there is something about, as a woman, and in particular about being a woman of color, because I have also been on the receiving end of being called a cunt by a white man. That is deeply hurtful, and there is trauma involved with that, and that should never happen. And all of the anger, sadness, grief, frustration, questioning, all of that is so valid. And also, the thing about being a person who decides to intentionally hurt people, to weaponize mental health, to weaponize the parts of a person's life that you have been allowed to know because you have been considered family or because you have been considered a friend, to weaponize those things against them is particularly narcissistic and entitled. And I think that what we have continued to find is that Dave Kempa is not willing to look himself in the mirror, but rather to hurt people because the truth is too much for him. Like, you, Dave Kempa, have been problematic. You have been problematic in the way that you have been in community because you have refused to take accountability. And when your friends who love you deeply have called you in on that, you have decided instead to sit with it. Like, instead of sitting with it, you have decided to hurt them. You have decided to spit venom at them. And we've experienced that. I mean, I got that in that text message from him when he told me that I was a terrible co-host and that I like never showed up and I never read my emails and blah, 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 blah. Like, you were intentionally digging into a part of yourself that is so in need of support, so in need of help. And you took that very like dysfunctional and disordered place and you weaponized that. And you threw horrible, hateful, hurtful words at people who genuinely love you. Like, I think that it cannot be understated to our listeners that for all of us, Flo was the last person. We were all like, Flo is untouchable to him.
Yeah, he would never do this to Flo.
He would
He'll
never.
do it to
No,
all of us, but he will never do
he
it
would
to Flo.
never. He would never. And Dave Kempa, a white man, called Flo, a black woman, a dumb fucking cunt. And not only did he do that, but he weaponized her campaign against her. Like, he hurt her deeply. And that is like that is traumatic. Coming back from that, from a person who spent so many Thanksgivings, he knows her story, he knows her mom, he knows her aunts, he knows things about her life that only the closest people know. And he fucked with her. And this is why we can no longer stay silent. Because if anyone is willing to do that, then you do not get the comfort of silence anymore.
Yeah, and like Gabe mentioned, like these aren't the only situations.
No.
This is a repeated pattern. And that's one of the reasons why it felt so important, is because given that it's a repeated pattern, like if the community doesn't know and it keeps getting silence, then it keeps happening. And we can't have people getting hurt in the community.
And also, there are people in this community who are afraid to say things.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Because they are afraid of his retaliation, because he has been threatening, because he is the definition of hurt people. There are so many people. I mean, I can count on more than one hand the people who have experienced deep harm at his hand. The number of people that I know personally who have paid therapists to talk about the shit that he has spewed at them, myself included, like, it is not okay. And I'm so tired. I'm so tired of the thing where, like, those of us who live with mental health say that it's because of mental health that we did the thing. Like, it's not, because we're adults and we have the ability to ask for help and we have the ability to choose our words. And I think for Kempa in particular, he has been offered, from the people sitting on this podcast right now, support in finding professional support over and over and over. But instead of taking anyone up on that offer, he has decided to be hateful, to be harmful, and to say that we are the problem. And, like, as I'm saying this, I have been the problem that one time on election night. But I'm willing, like, holler at me on the socials and I will send you all of the screenshots. I feel very comfortable in the way that I approached all of our conversations via text message. And also, I refuse to communicate with him in any other way but via text message, because I won't allow him to manipulate the conversation any further. Dave Kempa needs help. Dave Kempa attacked a community leader who is loved and supported and could have been our mayor. Dave Kempa, a white man, attacked a black woman by calling her a dumb fucking cunt. And we're done. People need to know.
Yeah, that pretty much fucking says it.
Yeah, it, you know, it's still pretty raw for me.
Yeah, it was a fucking week ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been a 10-year relationship, and one that I didn't think was going to end. And so it's, it's really hurtful. And I think what really stands out to me is that, like, not that anybody should have to be, but I have endured a lot of like emotional abuse from people, most of them who don't know me, right? I was, throughout the campaign referred to by racial epithets and called a pro criminal hoe and like all of these things, right? And honestly, most of that stuff rolled off my back because I'm like, it's really easy to hate people you don't know and to say things behind a screen when you don't have to actually like see the impact, right? Most of these people would not up to me in real life and say it to my face. And so it really stands out to me that not only did my friend of 10 years say such hurtful things to me, knowing that they were hurtful, but that he was my friend of 10 years. Like it's a completely different situation. Like he knows me. He has spent time in several of the places that I call home and knows my family and all of those things. And that hurts more. Like,
Yeah.
it's easy to shake off what people say about you. And again, not that anybody should have to. Like, we should probably, all, and I'm going to count myself in along with that, like be a lot more careful about what we say about and to people. I think we can be honest and direct and forthright without, being, you know, mean to people, because I think the world needs a lot more joy and a lot more love. And we should also recognize that the power of our words is so much more powerful when it comes from people who know us
Words
and who
matter.
have given access to us, and that
Yes.
all words are not created equal, and you know, all sources are not created equal. And it's much easier to dismiss something that comes from anonymous sources than comes from someone who knows you and who you love.
Yeah. And I think the goal of this entire show was to shine a light on all of this. And I think we all came to a space where we realized that our silence could perpetuate harm, and we were unwilling to allow that to continue to happen. Um,
And to give people who have experienced the same permission. I mean, I want to just acknowledge, like,
yes.
as hurt as I am right now, I had
Yes.
felt a grave responsibility to say something, because I recognize that by saying something, it gives a lot of cover and permission for other people to say something. And so I want you to feel free to tell your story as well, because it matters and you deserve to have it validated. And you deserve to be able to get the community support. And so that's something that, I think we should share. And so it was important to me to say what has happened, because it can't happen in silence. And because I think there is a responsibility as someone who just ran to be your mayor to be, you know, forthright about the things that are happening and the harm that was caused, and to create space for that.
And if you are one of those people who has experienced harm and wants support, please reach out to us, because we have a signal chat that has started for us to look out for one another. Um, it's a safe space to say what needs to be said and to alert one another of any potential retaliation that may come as a result of this show. I think, like, we kind of can't go on without saying that there is the potential for that. And that was a thing that has weighed heavy on all of us. But we understand the power of community and the power of taking care of one another. So please don't, if you are feeling alone in having experienced harm by Kempa, please do reach out to us. You can get us at City of Tea, at our Instagram. If you know us personally, then you probably know how to reach out to us, and we'll add you to that. Before we do have a letter that it's an open letter for the community that we want to read, and it's signed by like, a couple dozen people. But before I read that, I just want to give any of you a chance to say sort of if you have any closing thoughts or remarks to say.
I'll go first and I'll be brief. I just want to really I want to thank Flo for coming on and talking publicly about something that's super hard to talk about and super raw. And that's something that takes a lot of courage, and I want to name it and express appreciation for that, because I think it's an indispensable piece of working towards a community that's safe from this kind of shit. And so
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to name that.
Hashtag protect flow.
I have like other fucking glib shit that I want to say, but we'll leave those for the fucking Facebook comments, I guess.
Instagram. We do Instagram more than Facebook.
Well, whatever the fuck. It's all the Zuck.
That's true. God damn it. Yeah. Anyone else?
I was going to say one of the things that my main focus, especially recently, has been trying to work with folks to get more access to restorative justice and finding those paths that are best to do, especially within community. And that was one of the things that kind of like got me to the edge, was just the notion that he had been given so many chances, and every time if he even alluded to the fact that he was going to make a change, it always reversed itself fairly quickly. And so it's like, restorative justice is absolutely what we need to practice. And also there's a point at which the person being asked to make amends refuses to, and that's when it needs to be brought to community to make sure that people know, so harm doesn't continue, which is where we're at.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna close us out by reading this letter. And we'll be back with you eventually, huh?
Hang on real quick before you
Yeah.
do that, Shannon. I just want to say one more thing, which is that I also like Flo, there have been several, Dave is a person that I still love on a lot of levels. As mad as I am at him right now, and as mad as I have been at him, he's been one of my best friends for a long time. And regardless of, how that's gone and all of that, I'm beyond the part where I care to be any kind of piece of his restorative process.
Yes.
I'm kind of too keyed up about shit to do that, but I know that there are a lot of people, including people on this call, like I've just said, who love Dave. And I think all of us, even the people who are furious at Dave on this call, want the best for him.
Yeah.
And I want to name that there are people who really are dedicated to helping him get the help that he needs, because there is a version of Dave Kempa,
yes,
who is a delightful,
amazing
hilarious
person. Yes,
incredible person, somebody who can make you fucking cry laughing, somebody who is super smart, super good at, what the fuck is the word I'm looking for? Networking, all of this stuff, that is, when I think of my friend Dave Kempa, that's who I think of. And that guy is in the fucking back seat right now. I think my hope, as well as the hope for basically anybody who knows him, is that guy could get back in the driver's seat at some point. I'm fucking not willing. I'm not willing to be a part of that process because, frankly, I'm too pissed off. But there are people who are willing to be a part of that, and I just want to name it, say that I respect it, and give my support to it, because ultimately, there's a really amazing version of Dave Kempa, and Sacramento deserves it. Sacramento deserves to have that version and not the one we fucking currently have.
And he deserves to be that version.
Yes, and he also, yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just kind of echo that on your part as well as PJ's, that like the account, there's never a point in time, especially with the community that we consider ourselves to be members of, like that the doors to accountability are ever closed, right? Or that the doors to a restorative process are ever closed. It's just that the people that are sitting here right now are have exhausted their resources to do it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really important piece of the letter that Shannon's about to read.
Yeah. So the letter, it says, Sacramento, for too long, Dave Kempa has been allowed to spread his toxicity throughout our community while actively refusing to take part in any real accountability process. The comfort of our silence is no longer his. Calling a Black woman and community leader a quote, dumb fucking cunt is the last straw. For many of us, the emotional labor reserves have been run dry, but the need to take a stand is strong. His behavior and language are harmful, misogynistic, abusive, manipulative, and deeply hurtful. He refuses to take accountability. Over the years, he has been advised of his harmful behavior multiple times by multiple people. He has been privately called in and offered support repeatedly, but has either chosen not to engage or has given lip service to changing and immediately reverted to his old modes of behavior. An option of restorative justice is available to him and always has been. Dave Kempa's behavior cannot continue to be tolerated. Dave Kempa is not welcome in our community until he can fully participate in a transparent accountability process. Until then, we need the community to know these things so that they are aware and can avoid his abuse where possible. He needs help or will continue to harm people in the community. It is our hope that there are still comrades in the community willing to walk alongside Dave Kempa as he receives this message and weighs the option to seek help. You who choose to walk with him need to speak truth to him, or he will feel emboldened to continue this abuse of community members. In community and solidarity, and I'll go ahead and read the names of those people who have signed: PJ Andrews, Flo Kofer, Shannon Dominguez Stevens, Chelsea Fink, Gabriel Geip, Nate Halson, Skylar Henry, Nikki Jones, Christy Ketchum, Kula Koenig, Tamika Lecluse, Krista Marshall, Ryan McClinton, Ebony Chambers McClinton, Elaine Nye, Claire Palmer, Mercedes Piedra, and Margot Rinaldo. Dave, we hope you get help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For real,
And
man.
that Dave is the T.